There is a moment that comes each winter afternoon in Scandinavia, sometime between 3 and 4 o'clock, when the light fails and the world seems to collectively exhale. Streets that were busy an hour ago begin to empty. Voices that carried clearly in the cold air drop to murmurs. Windows glow softly from within, but the space between buildings grows darker and quieter with each passing minute. By 5 or 6 in the evening, the difference is unmistakable. Scandinavian cities and towns in winter are noticeably quieter than their counterparts elsewhere in the world. This is not the quiet of emptiness or abandonment. People are still there, still awake, still going about their lives. But something about the winter evening shifts the volume down, turns the tempo inward, and creates a soundscape that feels almost contemplative. Cafes fill with low conversation rather than laughter. Public spaces carry fewer voices. Even celebrations, gatherings that in other cultures might involve music, shouting, and revelry, are marked by restraint, by candlelight and soft speech, by the kind of quiet that invites listening rather than performing. For visitors from louder cultures, this can be disconcerting. The silence feels heavy, sometimes even uncomfortable. Is everyone sad? Are they unfriendly? Have they simply given up on winter and retreated into isolation? But for those who live in Scandinavia, the winter evening quiet is neither depression nor withdrawal. It is something else, a cultural practice, a seasonal adaptation, a way of being that has been shaped by centuries of living in a place where darkness dominates half the year and where survival, both physical and psychological, has always depended on finding ways to endure the long, cold nights without burning out. The question is, why are winter evenings so much quieter in Scandinavia? What combination of geography, history, psychology, and culture has created this particular relationship with sound and silence? And what does this quietness mean, not just as absence of noise, but as a positive presence, a deliberate choice that shapes how people experience winter, how they connect with each other, and how they make sense of the season that tests them most deeply? In this story, we will move slowly through the layers of Scandinavian winter quiet, the biological effects of darkness, the cultural values that frame silence as virtue, the social norms that govern public behavior, the architectural and spatial patterns that encourage inward focus, and the philosophical traditions that treat stillness not as emptiness, but as richness. Along the way, we may find that the quiet of a Scandinavian winter evening has lessons to offer about how to inhabit darkness, how to be together without constant noise, and how to find meaning in the simple act of being still. To understand why winter evenings are quieter in Scandinavia, we must begin with the most basic fact, the darkness itself. In the northern latitudes, winter days are brief. In Stockholm, the sun rises around 9 in the morning in December and sets by 3 in the afternoon. In Tromsø, above the Arctic Circle, the sun does not rise at all for weeks. Even in southern cities like Copenhagen and Oslo, the quality of winter light is weak and slanted, offering only a few hours of what could generously be called daylight. This prolonged darkness has measurable effects on human biology. Research from Finland shows that approximately 85% of adults notice that seasonal changes affect their mood, energy levels, sleep patterns, and social behavior. Around 12% suffer from seasonal affective disorder, SAD, a form of depression triggered specifically by the lack of light. The darkness disrupts circadian rhythms, the internal biological clocks that regulate sleep, hormone production, and mood. Without sufficient daylight, the body struggles to calibrate itself, leading to fatigue, sleep disturbances, and a general sense of heaviness. Timo Partonen, a researcher from the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare, explains that while people may sleep more in winter, they often do not wake feeling rested. The body is tired, but the sleep is not restorative. This chronic fatigue naturally leads to quieter behavior. People have less energy for loud social activity, for staying out late, for the kind of high-energy interaction that characterizes evening life in sunnier climates. Interestingly, not everyone experiences this the same way. Residents of the far north, where the polar night is absolute, sometimes report less distress than those in southern areas where the days are merely short and gloomy. One reason may be snow cover. In the far north, deep snow reflects what little light exists, brightening the landscape. In the south, bare ground and rain create a darker, more oppressive environment. But across the region, the biological response to reduced light is consistent: lower energy, altered mood, and a natural inclination toward quieter, less stimulating activity. This is not pathology, it is adaptation. The body is responding to environmental signals, conserving resources, preparing to endure a season that, for most of human history in these latitudes, was genuinely life-threatening. The quiet of a Scandinavian winter evening begins here, in the biology of darkness, in the body's deep knowledge that winter is a time to turn down the volume and preserve what strength remains until the light returns. Biology alone does not explain the quiet. Many places experience long winters, but not all develop the same cultural relationship with silence. Scandinavia's winter quiet is also rooted in a set of cultural values that shape how people understand themselves, how they interact with others, and what behaviors are considered appropriate in public space. Scandinavian cultures tend to value introversion more than many other societies. While this is a generalization, there are extroverts in Sweden and introverts in Brazil. The cultural baseline leans toward the quieter end of the spectrum. Personal space is respected. Silence in conversation is not uncomfortable. People do not feel compelled to fill every pause with words. In fact, the ability to sit comfortably in silence with another person is often seen as a sign of true friendship or intimacy. Research on Nordic conversation patterns shows that Scandinavians tend to take longer pauses between speakers, give more complete and thoughtful responses, and engage in less small talk than people from more verbally expressive cultures. This is not unfriendliness, it is a different communication style, one that values listening, reflection, and the weight of words rather than their volume or frequency. There is also the influence of Janteloven, the law of Jante, a set of social rules that discourage boasting, standing out, or drawing attention to oneself. While Janteloven is often criticized as oppressive, it also creates a culture of modesty and restraint. Loud, attention-seeking behavior is frowned upon. The person who dominates a room with their voice, who insists on being the center of attention, who performs rather than participates, is violating an unspoken social contract. In winter evenings, when people are already tired and low on energy, these cultural values intensify. The tolerance for noise, for performance, for social demands decreases. Gatherings become smaller and quieter. Public spaces are navigated with minimal disruption to others. The collective agreement is that winter is not the time for loud assertion, but for gentle coexistence. This does not mean Scandinavians never celebrate loudly or engage in boisterous activity. Midsummer, with its long light and warmth, is famously exuberant. But winter celebrations, even Christmas, the most festive time of year, are marked with a different tone. Candles, not fireworks. Quiet meals, not raucous parties. Intimate gatherings, not crowded festivals. The culture has learned to calibrate its energy output to the season, conserving loudness for the times when the body and environment can support it. The Scandinavian concepts of hygge and koselig provide a philosophical framework for understanding why winter evenings are spent quietly indoors rather than loudly outside. Both words are often translated as coziness, but they carry deeper meanings related to atmosphere, presence, and the quality of shared time. Hygge is about creating moments of warmth, safety, and contentment, often through simple means: candles, soft lighting, comfortable textiles, warm drinks, and the presence of close friends or family. It is not about luxury or intensity, but about savoring the ordinary, making the evening meal special not through elaborate preparation, but through attention and presence. Crucially, hygge is quiet. Loud music, bright lights, and high-energy activity disrupt the atmosphere. The ideal hygge evening involves low voices, gentle laughter, the soft sounds of a fire, or the rustle of pages turning. The volume is turned down deliberately, creating a space where people can relax completely, where the nervous system can settle, where there is no need to perform or compete. Koselig carries similar meanings in Norwegian culture. It describes the feeling of being comfortably settled in a warm, intimate space while the cold and dark press outside. A koselig evening might involve sitting with a book and a cup of tea, or having a few friends over for a simple meal and quiet conversation. The emphasis is on atmosphere, on creating a refuge from the harshness of winter, and that refuge is fundamentally quiet. These concepts shape behavior. When the cultural ideal of a good winter evening is one of quiet warmth and gentle presence, then loud parties, crowded bars, and high-stimulation activities feel out of place. People internalize the hygge koselig framework and seek out experiences that align with it. Winter evenings become times of deliberate retreat, of turning inward, of creating small pockets of light and warmth and protecting them from intrusion. The sauna, a central feature of Nordic winter life, especially in Finland, embodies this philosophy. The sauna is hot, yes, but it is also quiet. Conversation happens in murmurs. Silence is not awkward, but expected. The experience is inward-focused, meditative, a time for the body and mind to reset in stillness and heat. After the sauna, the typical pattern is to cool down, perhaps have a simple meal, and spend the evening quietly, reading, talking softly, or simply sitting. The rhythm is slow, the volume low. This cultural architecture of the winter evening, built around hygge, koselig, and the sauna, creates a society-wide expectation that winter is a time for quiet. It is not imposed from above, but collectively maintained, a shared understanding that this is how one survives and even thrives in the long, dark months. Scandinavian winter quiet is also enforced through social norms about appropriate behavior in public space. In many parts of the world, public spaces, streets, cafes, trains, are filled with loud conversation, phone calls, music, and general bustle. In Scandinavia, especially in winter, public space is treated more like shared private space. You are allowed to be there, but you are expected not to impose on others. Speaking loudly on public transport is considered rude. Playing music without headphones is almost unthinkable. Even conversations in cafes tend to be conducted at lower volumes than in Mediterranean or Latin American countries. The cultural expectation is that your presence should not disrupt others. This creates a soundscape that, especially in winter evenings, feels remarkably hushed. There are practical reasons for this. In small, tightly packed Nordic cities, noise travels. Apartment buildings with shared walls and floors mean that loud neighbors are a genuine nuisance. The culture has adapted by developing strong norms around sound management. People learn from childhood to moderate their volume, to be aware of how their noise affects others, and to value quiet as a public good. Urban design reinforces this. Scandinavian cities tend to have well-insulated buildings, thick walls, double or triple-glazed windows. The architecture itself dampens sound, creating interiors that feel acoustically separate from the outside world. When you step inside from a winter street, the silence is almost physical, a sudden absence of wind, traffic, and the small sounds of urban life. In winter, these quiet public spaces become even more pronounced. People move quickly from place to place, minimizing time spent outside in the cold. There is less lingering on street corners, less outdoor socializing, less of the ambient human noise that fills warmer climates year-round. The result is streets that by 6 or 7 in the evening feel almost deserted, even in major cities. This is also a function of work culture and timing. Scandinavians tend to work reasonable hours and prioritize time at home. By 5 or 6, many people have already left the office and retreated to their homes. The evening rush hour is brief, and then the city quiets. Unlike cultures where evening is when social life begins, dinners at 9, bars filling at midnight, Scandinavian evenings are for home, family, and rest. The geography of sound in a Scandinavian winter city thus reflects a set of interlocking values: respect for others' peace, prioritization of home life, preference for quiet over stimulation, and a cultural agreement that winter evenings are not times for public exuberance but for private restoration. Perhaps the most distinctive aspect of Scandinavian winter quiet is the way silence itself is understood. In many cultures, silence is absence, the lack of conversation, a sign of awkwardness or disconnection. In Nordic cultures, silence can be presence, a form of communication, a way of showing respect, and even a mode of connection. In Finland, this relationship with silence is particularly strong. Finns are comfortable with long pauses in conversation. Silence between speakers can last minutes without causing discomfort. This is not because Finns have nothing to say, but because they value thoughtfulness over quick response, and because silence is seen as a legitimate part of interaction, not a void to be filled. The writer and philosopher Pico Iyer, exploring the concept of silence, described Nordic silence as rich and living, not empty but full of attention and presence. In a quiet room where no one is speaking, people are still together, still aware of each other, still participating in the shared moment. The silence becomes a kind of communion. This understanding of silence shapes winter evenings. When friends gather and conversation lulls, there is no panic, no rush to restart the talk. People sit comfortably, perhaps looking at the fire, sipping their drinks, simply being together. The silence is not a failure of the gathering, but part of its texture. There is also a meditative quality to Nordic silence. In the long winter dark, many people report a natural inclination toward introspection, toward turning inward and examining thoughts and feelings that summer's busyness kept at bay. The quiet evening hours provide space for this inner work. Silence becomes not loneliness, but solitude, chosen, restorative, even necessary. Ida Solhaug, a psychology professor at the University of Tromsø, notes that embracing winter, rather than fighting it, is a key survival strategy in the Arctic. Part of that embrace is accepting the quiet, the slowness, the inward turn. Rather than trying to recreate summer's energy and noise, Scandinavians have learned to find value in winter's different offerings: stillness, reflection, depth. This cultural comfort with silence also means that Scandinavian winter evenings can feel profoundly peaceful. There is no pressure to entertain, to perform, to keep things lively. The evening can simply unfold at its own pace, shaped by the natural rhythms of fatigue, attention, and the flicker of candlelight. For those accustomed to louder, more stimulating environments, this can initially feel strange, but many who adapt come to appreciate the relief of not having to constantly engage, of being allowed to simply be quiet. The quiet of Scandinavian winter evenings is not passive acceptance of hardship. It is an active strategy for thriving in difficult conditions. Nordic cultures have developed a sophisticated set of practices that use quietness, stillness, and inward focus as tools for maintaining mental and physical health through the dark months. Light therapy is widely used, with many households owning dawn simulators and light boxes that compensate for the lack of natural sunlight. These create gentle, quiet routines, waking slowly to artificial dawn, sitting near a light source while having morning coffee. The interventions are subtle, integrated into daily life without fanfare. Maintaining social connections is emphasized, but in quiet, sustainable ways. Rather than large, exhausting parties, people engage in small gatherings: a friend for coffee, a family dinner, a sauna visit with a neighbor. Timo Partonen stresses that symptoms of winter blues rarely improve in isolation, but that does not mean constant, loud socializing. It means regular, gentle contact, seeing familiar faces, sharing meals, being together without the pressure to be constantly entertaining. Exercise remains important, but it too is adapted. Walking, cross-country skiing, even cold water swimming, activities that can be done quietly, without gyms or classes, often alone or with one companion. These practices honor the body's need for movement while respecting its limited energy. They are meditative, repetitive, and quiet, allowing the mind to wander while the body works gently. The concept of seeking light in the darkness, as Solhaug puts it, is both literal and metaphorical. Literally, it means getting outside even on gray days, catching what little light exists. Metaphorically, it means finding small sources of meaning, beauty, and connection in the season's limitations. Lighting candles becomes a ritual. Preparing a simple meal becomes a meditation. Sitting quietly with a book becomes a form of self-care. These strategies share a common thread. They work with winter's nature rather than against it. They accept that winter evenings will be darker, quieter, and more inward than summer ones, and they find ways to make that quietness nourishing rather than depleting by filling it with presence, attention, and gentle ritual rather than trying to banish it with noise and stimulation. The quiet of Scandinavian winter evenings is not an accident or a symptom of depression. It is a complex cultural adaptation built over centuries, shaped by biology, geography, philosophy, and social practice. It begins with the darkness itself, which drains energy and shifts the body toward conservation and rest. It is reinforced by cultural values that prize introversion, restraint, and respect for others' peace. It is framed by concepts like hygge and koselig that elevate quiet togetherness into an art form. It is maintained through social norms that govern public behavior and architectural designs that create acoustically separate spaces. Most importantly, Scandinavian winter quiet is rooted in a different understanding of silence itself. Where many cultures treat silence as absence or failure, Nordic cultures recognize it as presence, a form of communication, a space for reflection, and a mode of connection that does not require words. This allows winter evenings to be quiet without being lonely, still without being empty, inward without being isolated. For those living in Scandinavia, this quietness is simply how winter evenings feel. It is normal, expected, even comforting. The soft murmur of a cafe in January, the hushed streets at 6 o'clock, the long silences between friends sitting by candlelight, these are not signs that something is wrong, but signs that winter is being lived properly, on its own terms. For visitors or newcomers, the quiet can be disorienting at first. The instinct may be to resist it, to seek out noise and stimulation, to try to replicate the energy of summer or of sunnier climates. But those who stay long enough often find themselves adapting, discovering that the quiet has its own rewards, that conversations without constant chatter can go deeper, that evenings without loud entertainment can be more restorative, that there is a particular kind of intimacy in simply being quiet together while darkness presses at the windows and candles flicker on the table. In a world that increasingly prizes noise, constant connectivity, endless stimulation, the performance of happiness and productivity, the quiet of Scandinavian winter evenings offers an alternative. It suggests that there are times and seasons when the right response is not more, louder, faster, but less, softer, slower. That darkness does not have to be fought with brightness at every moment, but can be inhabited, respected, even embraced. The winter evening quiet of Scandinavia teaches that silence is not emptiness, but fullness, not absence, but presence, not withdrawal, but a different kind of engagement with the world and with each other. It reminds us that the volume of a life is not the measure of its richness, and that sometimes the deepest connections, the most restorative hours, and the truest sense of home are found not in noise and activity, but in the simple, shared stillness of a quiet winter evening, where the only sounds are the crackle of a fire, the whisper of pages turning, and the soft breath of those we trust enough to be silent with.